There we go. Okay. Danielle's joining us.
Okay, good. Danielle doesn't want us to see her tonight.
I'm just getting my screens all set up.
Oh, yeah. I feel I've got a couple of different screens here to keep me honest in all of this. Okay, so this is the planning board for September 8th, 2021. First item on the agenda is review correspondence. I think is Valerie, take it away.
Sure. So I've got a number of updates today. One is from Century Mill Estates. I've been discussing with Andy a time to come to a planning board meeting to discuss a number of things. So he has now requested time on the next agenda, so September 22nd, to talk about steps towards road acceptance, a tax payment plan, affordable housing payments, and a few additional updates. So it hopefully will be a good opportunity to look toward next May's town meeting and make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. I've been talking with an applicant at the intersection of South Bolton Road and Farm Road. They're going to create 3 lots and do a common drive. They're asking if there is a common driveway agreement that the town or that the board has reviewed in the past that you like particularly, that might be a good template to use. And I was wondering if there is one that comes to mind. Maybe I can take a look at Houghton Farm. Right.
Yeah, what's the one on Main Street?
Yeah, the 649 John Powers Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think so that, I mean, that's a fairly recent one, so that would be, probably more in line with what the board is looking for now.
Okay, that's great. The Zoning Board of Appeals is looking at the Mallard Lane comprehensive permit. So they opened that public hearing process on August 10th. So that is an age-restricted development of about 11 units on South Bolton Road between Wheeler and Spectacle Hill Road. I was wondering how the board would like to provide comment on that application, if it's typical for you to have the applicant come in, not do a public hearing, but just present what the plans are, or if you'd rather have kind of a staff level discussion of those plans that we can have some planning board comment on the local waivers that the applicant is requesting.
I think we've had them come in the past.
I think we've invited them in the past, and I mean,
give a
they normally come in
presentation
without any problem. So,
yeah, just so we can get kind of, if any of our questions can be directly answered. So yeah, having them come in, just give a brief presentation. I was just during, not a public hearing, but just a business kind of, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Lots of new businesses looking at Bolton right now. So at 58 Main Street, Goodleaf Holdings, actually, I think, is looking to open up a recreational marijuana establishment. They do cultivation and manufacturing. They've been to the select board once. They're going to come back to the select board again tomorrow night at about 8 p.m. They're also hosting a public meeting on September 27th. So essentially what they're looking for is to sign on with the selectmen onto a host community agreement. And then at that point, they would come before the board for their special permit. So there's more information. I think I've provided a link there. there's more information if if you're looking for what their presentation looks like, what their business model might be. There's also a group looking at 500 Main Street, so that's the Kane land, looking to do a warehouse and a 42 unit active adult neighborhood on that piece of property. That does require a zoning change. So that may be something that they will come to the planning board with in the future. Even though it's in the business district and mixed use village overlay, the warehouse itself is not currently allowed in the zoning. So we would have to review that and discuss further. I've also been speaking with a firm that does rooftop greenhouses. They're looking at locating at a couple different locations along Main Street, and they also have a site on West Berlin Road. So they're looking to get an agricultural exemption to create also kind of a warehouse style building where they would do rooftop greenhouses, and then inside of that warehouse, they would hold all of their washing, packaging, and distribution facilities. So they may also be discussing some site plan approval style questions with planning. Also, our master plan public forum was delayed from July, just out of thinking about residents' summer schedules. So that is now going to be October 17th. It's a Sunday at the Florence Sawyer cafeteria. I think that's all I had. We have the next meeting will have two different public hearings. We have our first detached accessory apartment special permits for Norse Road, and also an A&R and backland lot off of Meadow Road. A lot happening.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Any questions from the board on any of that? No. Okay. Next, approval of minutes for August 11th and August 16th.
I did not get to the minutes of the 11th, okay, but I think there's some quick minutes from the meeting on the 16th available.
Okay. Okay, Pete, were you at the 16th meeting?
Yeah, so I wasn't at either of those August meetles.
Okay.
So I don't
think we can vote on them because
no, we'll need to defer those until the next.
Do those both the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
That gives me more time.
And another meeting to add to the list now. So okay. Okay, so moving on to business. Vote to accept Houghton Farm Common Driveway as-built plans and release associated bond. Okay, so I was looking at it, it wasn't quite clear whether the niche comments have been addressed or if those are still pending. So I don't know whether Valerie or I guess Greg can chime in on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg Roy, Dillison Roy, appreciate the time this evening. So I spoke to, I confess I have not been out to the site since I received this memo to verify this, but I spoke to Peter Bradley, who's the contractor that's been involved working on both the road, Houghton Farm prior to street acceptance, and also the common driveway, getting this sort of ready for closeout. And his response when I forwarded this memo on was that, geez, it looks like that was the punch list that we took care of already. That they had developed this punch list quite a number of months ago, and that they had ticked all that stuff off, checked all those boxes prior to us submitting the as-built plan. So, and I confess I did not get a chance to contact Nitch to sort of query him. His letter was a little unclear. I wasn't sure if he had. I mean, Valerie, do you know if he has done it? Did he do a follow-up site visit after we submitted the as-built plan, or how did that unfold?
It doesn't seem like they did visit it again, does it? It says that they reviewed, just
Yeah, they didn't
reviewed the
say.
asphalt plans, and then there was the site visit back in January. So
Right.
without having them present tonight to speak to that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I apologize. I was out of town a lot last week, so I didn't get a chance to contact him before tonight's meeting, but so anyway, it's our opinion that most of those things have been, most if not all of those things have been completed. Relative, there was a couple of points in his memo that I did want to address. One was, sorry, my computer is, there it is. Point number 5, if you have it up on your screen, bullet or item number 5, it says that the house on lot 11 has a different location orientation compared to the approved plans. And was that approved by the planning board? I mean, it wasn't approved by the planning board, but nor do I think that it really needs to be. You know, that was just an orientation change that was made in the field that was captured on both your as-built plan that was in front of you, but also the septic system plan that was reviewed and submitted by the Board of Health. So I just wanted to sort of give you a response or an update on that. And then number 6 is relative to the apron, grading of the apron right at the circle. And I actually addressed that right in my cover letter. We shot that, the as-built, and compared that to the proposed plans, and it looks to us like that was graded in conformance with the approved plans. So I don't see that there's any significant deviation from how that was constructed relative to comparison to the approved plan. So I'm sure that perhaps the DPW director may want to weigh in on that one final time, but that was our conclusion after comparing as-built information to the proposed. The other items, I guess I'll just have to say that we'll have to contact niche and sort of just, if any of them are still remaining, we'll have to clean them up, but those will be done in very short order.
Okay.
I guess what would be good is if we could get a follow-up letter from Niche kind of closing out these items. Because right now it looks, I mean, their letter's dated August 19th. So I don't know if they need to do clearly another site visit out there just to, confirm that this stuff has been done. But I think we would definitely want a letter from them kind of closing it out. And Greg, maybe that's you calling them, discussing with some of that stuff, but.
Or if it's acceptable to the board, I will just notify Valerie when I'll reach out to my client again, and I'll notify Valerie when we believe we're, just to reiterate that we believe we're completed. And then perhaps it's more appropriate for Valerie to reach out to Niche. I mean, I'm happy to call him too, but if Valerie wants to.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then, yeah, we can go from there. I mean, applicant is interested in getting your blessing on this, but if it needs to go a couple of weeks, that's okay. It's been almost a decade, so.
Yeah. I mean, we'd like to close out too, but I just want to make sure that it's all set. So.
Yeah, understood.
Okay. So I guess we'll table this for hopefully the next meeting.
Yep, that sounds good. I'll get that on the agenda for the 22nd again.
Okay. Greg, that'll give you time to get everything, get out there and review it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So that's that. Okay, next is Bruce Wheeler from Habitech, an update on Tadmor Square development and conceptual discussion of mixed-use zoning at parcel 6B-3.
And I'm also here for that as well, Mr. Chair, but I'll let Bruce, I wasn't sure if Bruce, you wanted me to lead? Or if you wanted to-
Yeah, Greg, why don't you start off?
Okay, so Bruce Wheeler, as you mentioned, is here representing Habitech, and we've been I think we've been before your board several months back. We've also visited the master planning committee to discuss and present a concept plan for a mixed-use development on the commercially zoned property immediately behind the highway barn, that has frontage on both Main Street and on Forbush Mill Road so this parcel kind of surrounds the highway barn, if you can imagine that. It's approximately 5.4 acres in size, and the parcel was created out of the parent parcel that became the Tadmor residential development, which is immediately next door, which has been substantially built out. There's a few more homes to be constructed in there. But this is the portion of the land that was within the business commercial zoning district. So Bruce's team has been developing concepts for a mixed use, which would include a flats residential building, which would be age restricted to over 55, and would be apartment garden style units, but would not be apartment for rent. There would be units that would be for sale units. So it would give what we believe is a good, some more diversity in town relative to additional options for housing units for folks to be able to. I think the goal for folks to be able to downsize but still stay in town and sort of keep their surroundings. And it would be combined with a commercial mixed use portion. And we're proposing, currently we have interest from a coffee shop use. We presented this we sat with the building inspector, building commissioner a few weeks back, because we understand that that proposed use would be a fast food use that would really only be allowed as an accessory or ancillary, however that's worded in the bylaw use. Mike was nice enough to sit with us and hear us, and then said, you really ought to go see the planning board to discuss that proposal. So the primary, and we have one other thing we want to talk to you about relative to zoning at large, but the primary thing we wanted to discuss with you this evening is just that. We have a mixed use proposed, which obviously needs some zoning relief, which we'll talk about in a minute, from an overall standpoint to allow the mixed use. But we have a proposed residential component that's 40 some odd units. And then we have relative to that use, a relatively small, say 5,000 square foot commercial piece, which would be the coffee shop portion that would fit into your, that would be defined, I think, by your fast food bylaw. And we're asking the board if that unit, that mix would be translated by the board or interpreted by the town as if that unit mix would make that use, the coffee shop use, accessory to the main use on the property, which would clearly be residential. We think that from almost any metric that you would review, size of the building, parking required, tax revenue, traffic generation, any metric that you would review, the residential component of this project is going to drive and be sort of the primary use on the property, given the proposed size that we're proposing. And so, but be that as it may, it's an interpretive issue with the bylaw that I think would need to be made. And Mike was not, I think, willing to, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but Mike really was interested in hearing the planning board's, at least the planning board's commentary on it, I think, before he made a ruling on that. So,
Greg, do you want to put the plan up?
oh, I can. I'm sorry. I have it on my screen and I forget. Yeah, am I allowed to share, Mr. Chair? Is that acceptable?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I apologize for that. I should have asked you earlier. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and again, so you can see this L-shaped or T-shaped building here is the proposed residential building. And then the proposed rectangular box up front here would be the commercial space that we're referring to. And again, just to put you in perspective, Main Street is here. Forbush Mill is this road right in this area here. Green Road, you can just barely see right here. The high school is just off the page, and this triangular piece right in here is the Highway Barn portion of the site. So that's sort of the primary question. The other sort of reason we're here this evening, in addition just to giving you folks an update of where we've been over the past several months since we last came before you, is to say that and acknowledge and I guess remind the board that to do this proposed development would of course require some zoning change, because this parcel is zoned, is commercially zoned, and so we would not be allowed to put the residential component as we're proposing it on this, and certainly not the density. We have reviewed the mixed-use village overlay district provisions, and we believe that this project could fit within those parameters. So we believe that one way of remedying the zoning issue would be to ask that the town include this parcel or parcels in this area within the mixed use zoning overlay district that's already established in town. And I guess we wanted to so it's sort of a secondary point with the board this evening. We wanted to present that a little bit more formally. I know we're here just informally before your board, but just to see if we could get some commentary from you folks relative to that avenue. Bruce, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I think that the main point is we're trying to understand if the having the Duncans out front would be accessory, because we're trying to fit ourselves into the village overlay district zone, and so we don't want to be continuing to have something on the plan that would be inconsistent with that.
Okay, I guess there's two separate issues. I think from a personal perspective, I don't, assuming it doesn't trigger any spot zoning issues, I don't have a problem with with proposing this parcel be moved to the mixed use overlay. I think there's some other parcels on Forbush Mill that are covered by that. Or was that, or no? Okay.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, the mixed use overlay is mostly in the around the 495 interchange.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just adding another parcel to it isn't spot zoning, right? I mean, because you're continuing to add to it, or is that not the case?
I think we need to consider that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you are still changing the zoning of one parcel.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at who owns the other parcels are on Forbush Mill. Drawing a blank on his name now.
The package store piece.
Yeah.
Also
I don't know that he would be open to adding his parcel to the mixed use overlay as well, and then it's or if town council looks at this and says this would not trigger spot zoning, you know. But I mean, from a personal level, I don't see that as a, you know, I don't think that would be a big issue. I think it's probably, in my opinion, making a overly large stretch to claim that the Duncans is ancillary to the, I mean, you know, to the rest of the business there. If the units were rentals, you know, where there's, you know, kind of an ongoing business relationship, I might be able to squint really hard and say it might be okay. But where they're being sold off as a, you know, it's, you know, once that initial sale is done, then there's really no business there that it's ancillary to.
Okay, Mark, what would your interpretation be if we move the 5,000 square feet of retail space out front where that dunk was?
It's not a matter of where the space is located. There's not really I mean, a standalone Dunkin's is a standalone Dunkin's. It's not ancillary to anything else. If I look at Country Cupboard, there's the Dunkin' area in there, but that's kind of complementary and ancillary to the overall convenience store of you know, that the Country Cupboard is.
Okay, so the Duncans, so it doesn't sound like the Duncans really fits, and that's just what I'm trying to ascertain, because I don't want to, I don't want to, I'm kind of finalizing architecturals, and I want to come in and have a more complete discussion. But if it's not really going to be ancillary, regardless of where it is, if it's in the inside and part of the residential building, or if it's out front, then I think that we'd be inclined to eliminate it, because I think that we want to simplify the zoning dynamics. So I just want to confirm that the interpretation, just your initial thought, your initial reaction is that the Duncans wouldn't be considered ancillary regardless of where it was.
That's my take on it. Yeah, I don't know if the other board members have different thoughts.
I think, yeah, a standalone Dunkin' Donuts unfortunately isn't going to fall under it when you've got a residential building there. I think that's kind of the.
But also, if it's inside the residential building, I just want to confirm that you feel the same way. I want to get as clear a read so that I can. I want to.
Well, I don't
understand where you folks are, so I can try to align myself as, you know, with that idea.
Is there anything, I guess, I think there is, you know, stuff in the bylaws that's prohibiting it as a standalone establishment, but Valerie, is there anything that would prohibit it inside of a building like that?
Again, I mean, I'm not sure the location. I mean, so if we have a strip mall, you couldn't have a standalone Dunkin's in the strip mall, even though it's part of a bigger building, because it's still a standalone business. Whereas a Country Cupboard, it's governed by when Country Cupboard is open or not, and, you know, is kind of renting space from that other business.
Yeah, it's more like it's more, I think I understand what you're saying, Mark. It's a counter.
Yeah, I mean, there's a counter. Yeah, I mean, so if you're saying you're proposing a convenience store and you wanted to have a Dunkin' counter, I think that would be allowed.
Did you grab your hat?
You've already allowed it at Country Cupboard.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, that's really helpful, because I just don't, you know, as I kind of make sort of go further with the design. I don't want to, I don't want to be out of sync with the interpretation.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful feedback. So if that was the case, what we would probably do is we would put the retail space out front, and then have the building just be all residential. Have a a 5 to 6,000 square foot retail building in that front location. So that the layout and design would still be the same. It would just be a different, we just wouldn't have the Dunkin's spot there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
failed to mention that in my initial remarks. We do have a retail component with this that currently under this plan would be located within the residential building on the first floor.
Yeah.
So I omitted that from my opening remarks. So just so the board's clear. We
Yeah,
sort of
I
had,
remember that from the previous
Yeah, we had-
presentation. So
okay, yeah, I apologize for that.
it's okay, no problem.
Okay.
Offer just a few comments. I think it's an interesting question about how we use the term accessory, and that's something that I can look into a little bit more. From a planning perspective, when I think about mixed uses on one site, it's not necessarily you're still having the separation of uses in this concept plan here. So from that perspective, it could be more interesting to have more connectivity between a business use, retail use, and housing, so that it's not just a separation of uses within the same parcel. Whenever someone is suggesting a zoning change, I would recommend that the board consider, what is the benefit to the town? So what is the need that a zoning change fulfills, that the town currently, is a change the town is currently after? And I would also ask the board, what further information do we need in order to consider a zoning change? What other information would we want to get? If that's around, as Greg mentioned, traffic around 117, if it's around the need for affordable housing, if it's, what the true demand is for retail establishments. I mean, it may be interesting if the applicant, if Bruce, if you wanted to provide the board some of your own analysis of what the market is in this area for these types of uses. I think that could be helpful, because the town already, we do have business zoned parcels that do have vacancies. So, what is the benefit to the town to consider that use elsewhere? So what is the rationale for the board to expand an existing district?
Well, I'll certainly give that some more thought, and that's very helpful feedback. Thank you, Valerie.
And I think before we move forward, I do want to mention, I know that we had tried to set aside some time to have some update on Tadmor Square itself. And I know that, if we can shift gears a touch, I know that there is the requirement of the provision of the affordable unit, or the bond essentially for the affordable unit. I had spoken with George Gallagher earlier in the week, And so, part of, I think it's important for the board to know, like part of the thought here is that we would essentially be bonding that affordable unit that is required for the Tadmor development in order for it to be constructed at this development. And so I think that's another thing the board might want to consider. And just, that George had the question of, if there is an existing bond form for affordable units. So one question I had for the board is if that is something that exists from another subdivision or development that you're aware of, if there's a form that I can provide to George to kind of help make this process a little more simplified.
I got lost in there somewhere. So the plan is to take the affordable component of Tadmor and move it into the residential piece here.
Well, we did have a previous discussion about building the affordable unit as opposed to the lifetime fee, and which we currently we have set up to either move forward with creating the affordable unit by I believe a certain number of building permits, which we're probably getting close to. So we were planning on building a unit, and the previous discussion we had was as opposed to pushing the control mechanism further down. The suggestion was made to bond the fee until we could create an additional unit, and we were targeting this site as creating where we would create the additional affordable unit.
Okay. I'm not aware of any other time that we've done that, so I'm not quite sure. So there is no existing form or anything that like that we could pull out and use.
I can pull some other planners in the area and see if that's something that they've come across. I'm sure it's been done because there, as Bruce is saying, there's the opportunity to construct off-site, and that's
yeah, I don't
not
know.
always
Need
complete.
an additional form. I mean, wouldn't it be just the same structure as that you have to set up a bond? I guess I was imagining it wouldn't be different. There wouldn't be a different form.
Well, I mean, using form, but I mean, there'd have to be some. I mean, I'm not sure.
There might be some slightly different language in the form, but
yeah, but and the town needs to cover itself. I mean, if this requires a zoning change and town meeting doesn't approve that, what's the fallback then?
Then we would
a lot of things that need to be worked out. I mean, if this was already residentially zoned and you're just looking at saying, okay, this style of housing is more conducive to what to affordable. I might have given an affordable unit here as opposed to in Tadmor, where it's just a matter of delaying when the town gets that affordable unit. That's that's one thing. But here, where there's some other dependencies, we need to make sure the town isn't exposed to and losing out on that money, that affordable either unit or fee in lieu of, you know, if this doesn't come to fruition.
Well, and I think that's why the discussion moved to bonding, to make sure that the town was protected. So that
Yeah.
the town could exercise the bond in the event.
Bond
that-
would guarantee the payment, I believe it's $250,000. So the bond would guarantee the payment of the funds.
Okay,
That's the purpose of the bond.
right. Yeah, we just need to make sure that we're, you know, that the trigger, you know, to allow us to pull the bond if need be, and all that is worked out cleanly. Make sure the town council is happy with it.
I can follow up with George about that as well. George Gallagher.
Yeah, I mean, in general,
Fine,
you know, I prefer an affordable unit as opposed to fee in lieu of if we can get it. So, you know, from that perspective, it's more interesting to do that. But I want to make sure that we're not, you know, we're not shortchanging the town.
Yeah, I'm sure that that through the bonding language, we can make sure that it doesn't, there's no way for it to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll communicate through that that portion of it.
Okay. Okay. Danielle or Pete, anything else? Any other thoughts or comments?
Nope, not for me.
I think just, you know, like Valerie said, to get a little bit more information, because it's something I'm not familiar with, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in general, I think like the concept of the business in the building, in the main building, is much, because, you know, that is much more of a classic mixed use, you know, setup rather than a separate building. But I don't remember if our mixed use overlay bylaws require that or not.
Yeah, I think that that would be. I like it in the building as well. I think it makes perfect sense. I think that you know, as we try to align as we dove into the village overlay district, and you know, we realized that there might be a conflict with this Duncan building out front. Then I was just imagining that maybe the retail would go out there, but I think there's no reason for really that to happen. I think that there's I think we'll figure out the best way to with this feedback. We'll figure out the best direction to go. It's really helpful helpful feedback, and I do see that it as a mixed use, it makes sense to be in the building.
Okay.
So I have we have our architecturals close to being together, and wanted to come in at your next meeting if there's availability, and we can move the bonding documentation further down the road, but wanted to do a more complete really presentation of the building and the aesthetics of it, and also address more completely the spot zoning discussion.
Okay.
I just want to add one thing. I mean, when we worked on the village overlay, it wasn't just about in building. We definitely thought of it as like multiple pads where we can have, you know, some business and some residential. I mean, we didn't think it would be all one. I mean, we had two notions, one of having multiple pads, but then also like, you know, a house on top of a shop, you know, like apartment on top of a shop type idea. But we definitely left it general for both of those options.
Yeah. Okay.
we'll definitely focus more closely on that dynamic, now that we have a more complete understanding of Duncan's, then we can think through things more completely and incorporate that into the next plan.
Okay. And if you're presenting architecturals, I don't know, Valerie, if you want to invite the DRB to the meeting so they can see the presentation as well.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I am wondering, so our next meeting is September 22nd. We have a number of things on the agenda now. We have 2 public hearings and a few other ongoing discussions. I'm wondering if, so if it's the 22nd, I would appreciate the, plans or, whatever might be part of that presentation in the week before, so
Why don't we
that,
do the next meeting then?
yes,
Yeah, I think we do the next meeting. Then we can get them to everybody ahead of time. And I think if it's just, they're not going to be available in a week. They will be in 2. So
right.
let's just have it the next meeting, and as soon as we have everything together, I'll get it to you.
Okay.
Valerie. And
Okay, that sounds, I was wondering, I didn't want to rush you
no,
either, so.
we wouldn't quite be there. So, and what's the date of the next meeting?
It'd be
believe it's-
October 13th.
Okay. Great. That's perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, thank you for your time. That was extremely helpful.
Okay, good.
Good night.
thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, next on the agenda is Keys Farm subdivision, review and vote on bond reduction request. Okay. I know we had reduced the bonds the last meeting. I know not as much as the applicant's council wishes or would have liked that we did. So Valerie, where are we on all of this? And have we gotten clarification on all this from Niche or?
So I got more clarification from Niche. No site work has been done since the last bond reduction, which was the last meeting on August 11th, I think it was. So what the applicant's attorney requested that I just provide a list of the items that the town is still holding funds for. So I can pull that list up just so you can all see that. Essentially, my comment today is that it does appear that there's a discrepancy between the amount that the town is holding and the amount the town should be holding of just over $8,000. I'm not sure, if that was a bit of a calculation error just in this last bond reduction, or if this, sometimes numbers can be off just a little bit over time. But it does look like we do owe the applicant the 8,000. I have that figure written down somewhere, but it's just over $8,000. Aside from that, again, no work has been done on site. I know that they are interested in getting further reductions. I don't know if members were able to read the letter from Attorney Hostler. We could go over that, or we could review the remaining items that the town is holding, whichever is easiest.
I think it's more useful to go over what we're holding. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of posturing in his letter that really doesn't add to anything.
Yep.
So.
Okay. So this is the amount that I created the spreadsheet and I got it approved by Niche. This is essentially taking that that last bond reduction, it was it was a 3-page long spreadsheet. It was quite messy, kind of distilling it into the items that we're still holding, any funds for. Not all these items represent 100%. Some of them are 20%, some are 80%. But essentially we should be holding 127,940. So there's the discrepancy of 8,630. And one, I did not ask Niche to be here tonight. And part of most of that is because, again, there hasn't been site work done between the two meetings, and we do require more peer review funds. I believe our last site visit on August 16th probably got us close to empty. So before having Niche do any further review, we're going to need to request further funds. So.
Okay. Okay. I spent a little bit of time reviewing some of the stuff today. And one of the things I was looking at was the memo that we got from our DPW director. And I mean, there's some of the things that he identifies in there that are, some of the runoff from the driveways onto the moderator way, which unfortunately, that the board approved. The big thing that was in his memo that the board has definitely not approved is runoff from moderator way onto Route 85. And I think the applicant's engineer needs to take a serious look at that, but my gut feeling is that that they may need to look at stripping back some of the top coat and reapplying it with a more severe crown on it to force the water into the drainage structures. So I'm not sure that I buy that we the 20% that we held back on the top course is sufficient. I mean, that's my, that's, I mean, I'm not sure how else you fix runoff going down the street instead of into the drainage structures with, short of crowning it like that.
You either lower the structure or crown it. So you're right, Mark.
Well, I mean, if it's already running around the structure, yeah, I mean, either one would work, but I'm as anybody that works with me would know, I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm it's up to them to figure out a solution, but certainly either there needs to be money held to lower structures and ensure that they're capturing all that runoff, or they need to redo the pavement to direct the water into the structures correctly. So I'm not sure that I would. I mean, I think we should be withholding more for the top course, or adjusting drainage structures. So I'm not sure that I would say that we necessarily that there's necessarily more money that we need to owe, that need to provide to the developer.
Can I just ask, what is this $8,000 discrepancy? I'm not fully understanding what that is.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. So at the last time that we reduced the bond, we added up, because we didn't have an engineer, the author of the bond estimate to kind of explain what was going on. We in this meeting we added up what we felt came to the $88,052 and subtracted that. So I'm thinking there could have been an error there, or the bond has been reduced 2 or 3 other times, so a similar error could have happened at any of those points as well. It is not directly related to an item.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And right now, based on the 2 attorney letters from town council, they are asking obviously for a larger reduction, but based off of Niche's review and where we are today, we feel that it's appropriate to hold 127,940. And they still, and right now our peer review funds basically are 0. So I don't think it would make sense, at least I don't feel it appropriate to release the additional 8,000, knowing that we don't have any additional money to move forward with peer review funds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we can tie the two quite like that, but I mean, my take on it is that there's some of the work that we've said is more complete than it actually is, and that we need,
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Instead of, I think we withheld 20% on the top course to be able to, so they could have money to do, some repairs and some patches and stuff. But looking at the letter from DPW, I think there's some bigger issues that need to be, reviewed there.
So this figure, as Mark's saying, so the $11,000 for this top course, the second line here, that represents 20%. We could, as Mark is suggesting, that you could instead say that you wanted to have withheld 50%. So then this figure would come to $27,000. But this sum is the advice is the amount that's on the advice of the engineer, and it is town council's opinion that the 8,000 should be returned.
Okay. Okay. Pete, Eric, any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, if it was if we understood where that came from, like, it was a calculation, I mean, there's a lot of different things. There's a calculation error somewhere along the way. We said, oh, that would be that, but it's a little, I'm not against considering that. I just hesitate a little bit, not understanding where it comes from. If we had the previous, we go back through the records and we say, oh, there was just a mistake here and it should be this, then, fix that. But I don't know, that's my opinion. We should just try to investigate and figure out where it came from.
Okay. Eric, I know you were opposed to the previous bond reduction. Do you have any comments here?
I mean, this just sounds like a correction. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like Pete said, I don't know what the mistake is, but if you went through, Valerie, and verified that this number is correct, I'm comfortable with just doing the 8,000. I mean, if we were wrong last week, we should go with whatever Niche said to hold back.
And just to clarify, I understand, making the correction, but I'm nervous about knowing that we have 0 funds for peer review. There's no stipulations to deal one with the other, right? Like,
so I mean, my thinking, Danielle, is that if we were just wrong last time based off of peer review, then we're just correcting that. I mean, I wouldn't move any further on this 127K number until the funds have been,
replenish.
back on until and the funds have, added back on and niche has been able to get back out there.
Well, and site work continues. It's,
Right,
I believe
exactly.
Valerie was saying that they are not doing anything right now.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I also want the board to know that, I mean, you also can do nothing tonight. I mean, you can think, right? I mean, you can think about what other questions you might have for the applicant or for niche or for council. And, I don't, it's true that council does feel that the 8,000 should be returned immediately. But if you're interested in that question of should that 8,000 be maybe turned back into the top course, I don't know what the best advice is in terms of the immediacy of this bond reduction request. I mean, it does look very different from any other bond request I've seen, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, in general, with these bond reductions, I'll get back to the specifics, but it just in general, there's a lot of things that come up that are outside of these line items, like what Mark brought up with, we might need a bigger crown, and, that could end up being a lot more than what we hold back, so I don't know how moving forward in the future we can better protect the town. And if that 8,000, if we can legally hold it, because we think it'll be needed, then, that's what we should do. But we are where we are. Last meeting, we voted how we voted. We voted for it, although I was against it. So if we're just correcting that number, then I don't know. I guess, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the reduction request per the letter, the attorney's letter is, seems like it's for, 100,000, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, it is strange. I've never seen a request like that. So
Right.
I don't, we're kind of talking about two different things here, right? Like their
Well, we're
request.
not even, I don't think we're even.
No,
Well, first of all, we're legally allowed to keep 10% of the original bond.
yeah,
So-
well, we have to until the road's accepted, which is, so you have to keep at least 68,000 and change. I believe it's the number. So yeah, I mean, his letter doesn't, is off base there completely. The question is, do we, say we've reviewed it and there's an $8,000 discrepancy, here it is now, get back to work, or do we, do nothing until we review this and clarify it more with niche, and the peer review fund is funded? Do we change the percentages and say, you're not, until your engineers provide a better solution, your top course is only 50% done, not 20, not 80%. I mean, I think those are kind of the options that I think are on the table.
Yeah, so, I mean, that is a good point, Mark. I don't know if we can, talk. So when we used to have Hamway, he would come to every single meeting. I don't understand why Mitch doesn't come to the meetings, first of all, because there's so many questions here we could ask them. But yeah, I mean, how did they, like, when Fred Hamway was here, he would tell us how he came to his numbers. Now we just had this, I don't think we have that from Mitch, and so points that Mark bring up about the crown, or, other drainage issues, sometimes we would have a discussion with Fred and he would adjust his numbers, based on having other opinions. So, I mean, it's a good point, Mark. Maybe we should just wait until we can talk to Mitch.
Yeah, in response to that, I mean, an aside, just in Niche's defense, I did not invite them. Just because it did not seem like, you know, I do want to be sensitive that they're paid by the applicants, and we don't have peer review funds to cover that expense. However, I mean, if the board wants, we can invite them to the next meeting and continue the discussion. I've already let town council know to request of their attorney to replenish the peer review funds. I don't know exactly what their timeline would be for replenishing, but you know, it does make sense. You know, we've done this before to say provide peer review funds to allow our engineers to more thoroughly investigate the current situation on site.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say I have a hard time tonight. I know it seems like it's a simple correction, but I do not feel comfortable releasing that, I guess, tonight. I would like a little bit more, whether it's understanding exactly where that correction kind of came from, and or I'm just a little concerned about reducing it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I think if we look at the request, which is a strange, we say, you know, it's kind of a weird request, which hasn't really been exactly reviewed, although, you know, we know that the things they want on there, we've already said, you know, Niche has already said that those still need to be withheld. So I would assume if you went back to Niche and asked them with that letter, you know, they would say, no, withhold all its funds, right? But I think if you know, with this 8,000 number, it would seem a bit arbitrary, you know, like they've come and said, oh, we want 100,000 for these items. And we come back and we say, oh, there's this 8,000 that we don't really know where it came from, but we'll give that back to you. I don't have a problem if it is, you know, an error somewhere along the lines. I mean, these things are complicated. You know, I don't have access to the whole history of, you know, everything to go through and check myself, right? That's what we have, you know, Niche for. So yeah, it would just seem arbitrary, and I'm fine if, you know, it comes back at a later meeting that we dig into it and we say, oh yeah, you know, geez, somebody made a mistake here, and we should give you 8,000, you know, sure, and that then we can clearly, you know, explain what we're doing, right? Rather than, well, we don't really know, so here's some money. That doesn't seem right. I mean, it seems strange, and then they'd come back and say, well, this is an arbitrary decision that doesn't even, you know, make sense, and you guys don't know what you're talking about. So I kind of agree. It doesn't really make sense to do anything right now, and we can revisit if we have a little more info.
okay. I'm okay tabling this until we get more, you know, until we have Niche here to discuss all of this. Okay.
I will say one more thing,
Yeah.
not to, I don't mean to reopen that discussion. I just want to add it as an aside to what's been said. I have spoken with Niche about this. It seems like their attorney and the client are particularly interested in why the town is holding funds on street trees. So I just wanted to kind of let the board know that I've spoken with Niche about that specifically, and it's one question that we might want to ask the applicant is, and I think Mark actually brought this up in an email earlier today, is what was the date of planting of those trees? You know, have they actually been in the ground for a full year? We typically do have a 1-year warranty on all of the trees, and it's acceptable to have the board consider all trees as a whole. So you can decide for that item to be all or nothing. You can decide to return half of it. It's flexible, and it is up to you. There are already trees that have died. I don't know the exact number, but it's, you know, let's say 10 trees. So there could be further reduction on that point, but I think it's also fair to say that, you know, the reason that Niche held back all of the funds is because it has not been a full year, and the town is owed that 1 year warranty.
I mean, I think the other thing along that same lines is in the plan, we call out specific sizes and species, and I'm not sure what was actually planted. So I think, I mean, if the applicant could, the developer could go a long way by, just providing the receipt for here's the trees that we put in, and you see they meet the species and size that's specified, and we've replaced the however many that have died, and they've been in the ground for, a year or whatever. So, at that point I could say, okay, the trees, the trees are set. I mean, if the plan calls for, 2-inch caliper and you put in all 1-inch trees, then that doesn't cut it.
Right.
So I think, a little bit of information from him would go a long way to freeing up that money if that's really, yes, I mean, I can go and count, 42 trees or whatever it is. But I don't know the species. I don't know what size they are. So, and I'm not an arborist to go out and measure all of them to make sure, the proper way to make sure that they're meet their requirements. So, yeah, I think that needs to be communicated to the applicant as well, that, he can go, he can address that by providing the documentation needed. I think the applicant also needs to be reminded very clearly that winter is coming. And, it's doubtful that we'll give any paving extensions. And all the paving needs to be witnessed by the engineers. So if they want to actually have this, up for road acceptance at the next town meeting, they've got a lot of work to do pretty quickly here to, to get that all lined up and in place.
I do have one note on that. I think there were some frustrating interactions in the past month, and there was a time, I just want to say to the abutters and the residents here that there was a time at which I was quite confident that Niche would not be able to offer on-site inspections of the paving, but I think that we've worked out a situation where we can have inspectors from Niche present at paving, and we'll try for another. We'll try to see how it works with having Niche on site. So I know that that was frustrating for some residents to hear that we wouldn't have that inspection, but currently we are planning to. So
yeah, I think it's definitely important to have Niche on site there. I mean, as in the past, just there's some oversight there that it's really important. So if we can make sure Niche is able to do that, and they've confirmed that, I think that that's very important in this instance, especially with this developer.
Yeah, I think a top coat can look pretty, but if
well, it's not just the top coat.
Well, if they haven't installed the base properly, which is what Niche should be reviewing, the top coat can look good, but it won't hold up. So.
Well, it's also the driveway transitions that need to be replaced per how we talked about. I think it was last November.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And to answer the question from the audience, I mean, part of what Niche is there to review is that it's, that the paving is being done according to the town bylaw, town rules and regulations as far as weather conditions and temperature and such. And they would be, if the conditions don't warrant paving, then they would stop it.
Yeah, There's, they have specifications that were submitted as part of the plan, so, and that governs, as what Mark was saying, you know, the pavement needs to be a certain temperature, the temperature outside needs to be a certain, you know, like within a certain range. Obviously it can't be raining, like downpouring and stuff.
Yeah. So that is a big part of what they're there to do, is to oversee what's going on and make sure it's being done to code. Okay. Any other discussion on Keys Farm tonight?
The only thing I was just gonna ask, I see just one other comment
Yeah.
with regard to hand tamped. I think we specifically noted in the meeting minutes last November, when they are doing the driveway transitions, that it should not be hand tamped, that it needs to be compacted properly.
Yeah. And it definitely won't be tomorrow. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of lead time that they need to get the paving and everything lined up, and you know, they need to coordinate when the pavers can be there and when Niche can be there and such. So you know, this isn't a kind of a spur of the moment thing. You know, it requires a fair amount of yeah, I know it's been 2 years, but they tried to do it last year out of season and got their hands slapped for it. So we're trying to get it done as properly as we can. So just hang in there, I guess. Okay.
I think that's about all. That's all I had for moderator way tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see. I have the same question on plowing. If Bob were to walk or whatever, how would plowing work? And I'm not sure we have. There's I think for the board members, if you have questions like that, if you can get those to Valerie to summarize up and get to town council on, you know, what's the
Yes.
you know, I mean, especially, you know, I mean, routine plowing, you know, if Bob walks, I don't know how that would work, you know, how it would work with emergencies and emergency vehicles is where it gets pretty sticky. You know, and if there's damage to the pavement, because the town has had to go in and plow to get emergency vehicles in, you know, there's a lot of things that we need feedback from you know, town council on how some of these things work. We've never, fortunately, up until now, we've never had this sort of question come up. It's unfortunate it's coming up now, but you know, we're all kind of trying to learn some of these things.
Yeah. So if board members do, thank you, Mark, for reminding me. If board members do have questions about bonds or about you know, any other like legal matters associated with this or any other project, just feel free to give me a call or email, and I can always you know, try to provide answers. I don't want to, you know, guess at what would happen if we needed to pull a bond, but up until the moment the town is in ownership, or up until we own the road, we would not be responsible for plowing.
Yeah. Okay. So just one quick, I see Liz has her hand up. We'll take one quick question, then we'll move on.
Hi, Mark. Thanks. This is Liz Hutchins, 75 Mallard Way, obviously. So the question I kind of have for the board, and I don't want to kind of belabor the point, but if Bob walked, like, how does that work? Like, does he have to notify you, or is that a board decision? I mean, I'm sure there's probably multiple potential pathways for that to happen. But like, if he just was like, all right, I'm done, I'm out, and like walks away and like doesn't say anything to the town and just stops talking to the town, like,
that's also one of the questions that I gave Valerie to talk to town council about, is what is it that triggers, that the board would, under what conditions could the board say that he's abandoned the development and the town would need to look at taking it over to finish it out. I don't think we have an answer on that yet. So, like I said, we've never had to have this discussion about a developer before. So, unfortunately,
I think the board of selectmen could just vote to take up to 100,000. After 100,000, I think that has to be a town vote.
It does.
But what's the determination of,
what's the triggering event to say? Yeah, so under what conditions can the town say
abandoned?
It's abandoned and we're taking over, and that's where it all gets, starts to get pretty, arguably in theory the town is holding more than, in theory, when all is said and done, some of the money should be left over and should go back to Bob. So you could argue that we're taking his property by taking the bond. So that's where it gets sticky, I think. Valerie, yeah.
Yeah, I will, I do also, ahead of speaking to town council, just because it does cost all taxpayers money whenever we use town council. I'll also be speaking with other planners whom I know have had this experience before. So quite recently in Harvard, they had to pull a bond on a subdivision. So I'll be reaching out to their planning department, just talking about what that was like. But I think at this point, I don't want to speculate. So I think it's important to, again, not to speculate and to keep moving on in good faith.
Can I just have confirmation though, if something did happen dramatic like that, is that something that we as a neighborhood would be notified of? You know what I mean? Or is that something that the town would just kind of manage, and then we might get a little side note in a couple months of like, hey, by the way, we're going to be plowing for you now. I guess, I completely understand you guys have your pathways that you need to take, and that's proprietary and confidential, and that's fine. And you guys do what you got to do. But like, we're sitting here in this, you know what I mean, on a day-to-day basis. And without knowing what's going on, like every day we just have more and more questions. So, to this point, I think you guys have been very communicative, and we do appreciate that. Like Valerie, you've been amazing with responding to all of our emails, because I know we bog you down, but just knowing that if something happened, we would be notified would be helpful, so that we're not just kind of left in this like gray cloud of like, we don't know what's going on, and just to have faith that if something did happen, we would be notified.
I think that as soon as if ever the situation for this subdivision or any other, if ever there was a clear moment at which we understood that the town was assuming responsibility, we would let the residents know.
Okay,
I mean,
as soon as it's publicly available.
Yeah, I mean, it would be either on, if the bond is less than 100,000, then the planning board can vote. Under state law, I believe the planning board can vote to pull the bond. If it's over 100,000, it has to go to town meeting. So everybody would be pretty clearly noticed at that point. But yeah, I mean, there'd be a lot of meetings, a lot of discussion before that happens. So you would know. You guys are good about being here when it's on the agenda. So you would certainly know that what's going on there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. I guess that's we'll call moderator way done for tonight. Guess let's move on. The next thing on the agenda is for the planning board to start discussions about any potential town meeting articles that we want to think about for next year. Don't all speak at once here.
Well, Valerie, I don't know if you haven't, it's completely fine, but I know we've talked about just throughout the year sometimes where certain things kind of come up. We're like, oh, that might be a good town meeting article to think about next year. You don't by any chance have a list of any of that stuff?
Typically Erica would have like a list of a bunch of things that we would talk through, and then we would just cross stuff off and narrow it down to what we really wanted to do.
The one, I mean, I have a few ideas of things that could be interesting. And I also have heard, since my time here, I've heard specifically the sign bylaw come up. And that one is particularly dry. But it is important. There was a Supreme Court case in the last 4 or 5 years that came down. I think it was called Reed versus the town of Gilbert, essentially saying that towns can't distinguish between types of uses in the way that they're allowed to display the content of their sign. So I think that we should probably review the sign bylaw and make sure that that we're in compliance with that new law. And I know that this came up recently as well when I believe Doug Story in the last few months provided the planning board with a few comments on just what it feels like as a business owner to go through that process. So that could be interesting. I know that it's probably not the most exciting for you all. A few others, that I've been thinking of. Well, one is that I've heard through the work with the master plan that the zoning map might not be representative of what is within the actual zoning bylaw. So there might be some parcels that don't show up in that base map. So a simple article might just be to make sure that we actually have an accurate base map. So to go through the zoning code and make sure that all parcels that are noted within the mixed use overlay are actually showing up on that base map. And the same for all other zoning districts as well.
Along those lines, the actual business and those zones, don't match up with property lines. I know we tried to fix that as well, but I don't know if we want to try to address that again.
Right.
It
I don't
has
know,
been
we might
2
need another
years.
year.
It has, I think legally you can, because I think it's been 2 years since it failed, but I understand if you might want to wait.
No, I think if it's a planning board sponsored article, we could bring it back the next year. I think that's if it's a citizen sponsored article, it has to be 2 years.
Oh, really? Okay.
I believe that's the rule.
It was just
Okay.
more of, do we want to even attempt that given the feedback that we got at the last one, but.
Well, we can, even if you don't want to do, like, there were 2 properties in particular that were controversial.
Very
So
controversial, yes, take
if
those.
we just did all the other ones, and fixed all the other ones, like for instance, and I think, so the gas station one, the current gas station, I mean, they want to redevelop that, but they really can't because the line's literally right down the middle of their property. So, I mean, I think we should try to address that, and maybe that one should be in its own article. So they would take out do all the easy ones as one article, then another article, just do the gas station one, just so that one doesn't tank all the other ones, but I do think it should be cleaned up.
That might also spark some spot zoning.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Sorry.
say, I think the problem was we lumped everything together, and then there was, people even came up and said, oh, I have no problem with this and this, but this is my issue, and then it turned into, something there, so yeah, separate.
Yeah, I don't think it would be spot zoning because, because we're just saying that this entire parcel is going to be commercial instead of only the front 100 feet of it. And so,
I mean, basically the line goes right down the middle of their their parcel, and the line was arbitrary. That it was just it wasn't, the business zone wasn't drawn to property lines. It was just so many feet away from the highway and so many feet away from 117. It's just a square if you look,
Okay.
Yeah.
We might, it's true too that we might want to, just my comments to Bruce Wheeler, around, what do we need to know before we change zoning districts? I understand that some of these are parcels that have split zones, and you do want to correct that to make that easier for owners and anyone who's trying to lease those buildings. But we might want to consider kind of a broader like zoning audit to better understand what districts we currently have and just what the makeup is of those districts.
So I was just kind of joining in on when Bruce was talking. So I think if we were to do the mixed use overlay, we could add his property and Frank Chiodo's property and that whole corridor. But with the 40B coming in, I almost think, that we should just keep, so when Tadmor came in, we specifically cordoned that off as business. I almost would like it to be a business corner, business there, and then Frank Chiodo's. I would almost prefer that it's not housing. I mean, we're going to have 200 plus units at the highway. I don't know. I wouldn't mind making, I wouldn't mind looking at that whole corner with that property, Frank Chiodo's property, post office, like, how we can like think about making that a usable retail business zone completely,
I think that this might be a little, from my perspective, it might be too early for this town meeting. I think we might want to do more research of feasibility of those things. One thing I was thinking about for the budget this year, if I had applied for a grant from the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm thinking it was for a business district assessment and a market analysis to have someone who has technical know-how with economic development in this region to kind of do an audit of our business districts and say, what's going well, what's not quite working. So I'm thinking, if we don't get that grant, it might be a good, that might be another article at town meeting to try to hire a consultant to create that plan, to do some market-based research and assess the properties that we currently have in town. So just so that we can, that we can more easily stand on research and data as well as resident feedback and surveys to know that that we have broad-based support.
Another one that we talked about a few years ago. So we have I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically the agricultural business bylaw, accessory business to agriculture, which kind of is what Jay's falls in. And I think right now it's set, like the property has to be 15 or 20 acres. And we talked about, well, like cultivate care, like the therapeutic farm area. Like their property isn't quite big enough, I don't think, for that. And like even like Wendy Harp of the Phineas Wright House, she talked about doing a business. So like a smaller parcel that wants to do like an agricultural based business that supplements a farm, whether it's, even like a restaurant or, I don't know, a restaurant, maybe that's too much, but just any type of business that would supplement a farm and allowing the farm to be smaller, just so more people can make use of it. Yeah, I mean, you definitely get into an area where if somebody has 5 acres and they grow one tomato plant and they open a restaurant, you don't want that. So we have to think about it. But definitely allow smaller farms or smaller agricultural type uses to have accessory businesses. Something to think about. And we do have that kind of bylaw on the books, but I think it might be 20 acres. I forget what it is, but maybe we want to look at that number if it makes sense to be smaller.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, big thing there would be identify, how many parcels does it really impact? If we made it 10 acres or 5 acres, how many does that impact? And go from there. Okay.
A few others, you know, I would like to, I haven't done this yet, but I would like to find time to talk with the DPW about, you know, what a stormwater bylaw might look like, or I think the acronym is IDDE, like a discharge elimination permit. I know that Bolton is not an MS4 community, but as we grow and expand, and you know, we may in the future become one. I think that there could be more that we could do with a stormwater bylaw. I know that you all just did do more revisions.
Yeah, I mean, we did a couple of years ago, we revised, and we actually had a conversation briefly about, do we do a bylaw, do we just, you know, revise the individual sections? We decided at that point just to revise the individual sections to kind of know, to bring the town up to speed, or with some more of those stormwater regulations that we want to make sure are included. I think doing a stormwater bylaw, though, isn't a bad idea. It definitely makes it a lot easier. One, for developers when they're kind of looking at how to design the site and everything. The IDDE is a little bit different. I think that's an illicit discharge.
Yes.
So that's kind of a separate component. I don't think we necessarily have to worry about that here, because usually illicit discharges are when you have combined sewer outflows, or you have sewer draining into you know, this drainage pipes or something like that. So I don't think we want that, but a separate stormwater bylaw is definitely something that I think could be advantageous. And in that retrospect, I mean, it's one of those, just even in my job, we're struggling with trying to deal with the fact that the climate is changing with these flash floods, and how do we design to that? Because there's certainly no regulations out there that address that. And what's kind of the acceptable standards, but we're just seeing it more and more. So I think it's an appropriate topic as we kind of see the climate changing a lot more quickly than it has in the past.
So maybe at this point, that's more of a discussion with Randy, the DPW director, rather than actually looking for this year. But
Yeah.
I think it's definitely, I don't know how often the MS4 designation changes.
It's every 5 years usually.
5?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there was just one recently, and I think it got delayed because of COVID.
Yeah,
So.
and I was going to say, even though it's supposed to be every 5 years, there's been multiple times where it's been delayed. So they just they haven't been able to revise it, so the permit will just get extended, and they kind of keep doing that. So, but technically, it's supposed to be like every 5 years.
Because I think it is MS4 communities that need to have the illicit discharge bylaw.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a bylaw, but they have to have they have to have GIS showing that, basically identifying where they do have illicit discharges, and then they have to have a program kind of started to show how they're going to eliminate those illicit discharges. And so it's kind of a combination of multiple steps. And so they give a time frame, like, you know, within 2 years, you need to identify everything. So you do GIS. And then within 5 years, you need to kind of come up with a program, how you're going to potentially implement, you know, projects to eliminate them. And so they've got a whole process of that. You know, if Bolton eventually becomes an MS4 community, I think I don't see illicit discharges as being like a big item, but I certainly see stormwater and just general discharges to outflows and stuff like that being a concern, just with regard to the climate and making sure we're complying with that portion of it.
Okay, that's really helpful. That's good to know.
So what was the deal with when we had like the driveway connections in subdivisions where the bylaw didn't match the rules and regs, or the bylaws couldn't, you know, how the driveways lined up, or what was it? Was there something missing in the bylaws there?
I think it's vague. I think the way the bylaw can be interpreted, and it could be almost looked at either way. I mean, but I think the DPW has kind of taken a stance, and this is the previous DPW as well, and it seems like the new DPW in addition has taken the stance that they don't want, at the end of the day, any driveway runoff going into the a road that will eventually be a public right of way. From the developer standpoint, when they design their stormwater systems, they've included that runoff from the driveway into their stormwater systems. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 of why are they then designing those driveways to go into the stormwater systems if they're never going to get there. So you're almost forcing the developer to oversize their systems and then basically saying, but you can't allow runoff to go there. So that's where when we looked at this, from Keys Farm, last fall, I thought it was appropriate to say we could allow runoff to go into the roadway because it was clearly demonstrated that the stormwater ponds were designed to take that. It might be worth clearing up the bylaw to one way or the other. I mean, and maybe it's a conversation we have with the DPW. I understand their stance of saying they don't want runoff into the public right away. And that's fine, but I don't know if we necessarily should force the developer to then design their systems to include those driveways.
Right, we'd have to alter our rules and regs to fit that.
Yeah.
Well, it would be different though if the design, the driveway runoff went into the stormwater management system, but not through the public right of way. For example, it went down the driveway into something, I think the DPW is worried about water going into the road, creating ice in the winter or something like that. But if, it was designed so, like, just thinking about one of the driveways at Monterey Way, it comes down really steep. It was designed so it went off, not into the road, but into something that went in the stormwater management, and that would be different. So maybe there's two different.
Yeah, maybe it's some sort of clarification along that.
I don't think the DPW would care about the stormwater system. The runoff in the stormwater system is designed appropriately. They just don't want, this sheet flow coming into the road that's going to cause them to be out there sanding or dealing with it, every 5 minutes in a big.
Yeah, but I'd also put it back on the developer that they should be designing their closed drainage system in the roadway to take that. I mean, most roadways all have runoff that kind of come onto it, so it should be designed appropriately to take that runoff. It's a preference one way or the other, but I think there's some ambiguity, there's some gray area there that maybe could be cleaned up.
But even on top of stormwater though, I think, wasn't there some question about, there was a, say, 12-foot driveway and they only built a 10-foot driveway? Like, is that part of like the initial plan? Is that, something enforceable that we need to add in the bylaw? Or
We already did that. We already updated our rules and regulations. What was it, a couple months ago, that kind of added that clarification in there. So I think we're covered.
That was only where the curb cut and the
correct.
It did not enforce the
driveway width. It was just
full driveway permit to be implemented as shown.
Yeah, that was my question.
Shown, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that was, and yeah, it was. I mean, there's controlling where the curb cuts and making sure those match up with where they're shown is one thing. The other part is, we make the developer pull a driveway permit, but then, and we take the fee for it, but then we don't do anything with it. We don't make sure it's installed where it should be, or that it's a proper width or anything else. So I think that's what Eric is.
That's what I was getting at. And I remember
Gotcha.
Brian Falk saying, well, we don't address it specifically in the bylaws. So we couldn't, there was like, I thought maybe we should go ask him. Let me just go back to the emails. I remember there was something like that along those lines. I just didn't know if something.
Yeah, there was nothing enforceable. There's nothing in our bylaw that was enforceable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Clarification.
Go ahead.
I think we could have some more clarification around the driveway permit when it's a subdivision versus when it's a single family home or a shared driveway.
I mean, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
I think a driveway permit should essentially just be folded into a subdivision approval. I don't understand why there's a different process. But some of that's my own education. I haven't worked for a town that's had driveway permits, so it's a new field for me too. But I think that it's possible for the board to be able to even have greater say over how a driveway looks when it's part of a subdivision, and what we're seeing with stormwater runoff. It's much more important in a subdivision to know exactly what the width is and the slope is for the full length of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I can think of is that 10% number. Is that a state number of what the bond, or is that something that's in our bylaws?
I think that's in our bylaws.
I was trying to look for this 10%, and I did only a cursory look this afternoon because I saw in my notes from the last meeting that a resident had asked where that 10% comes from.
It's definitely not a state. I'm almost positive it's not a state, because we do multiple contracts with whether it's municipal, state, or private entities, and that percentage varies. It totally varies based on how the contract is done. So
Well, maybe we should look at that number.
It's definitely a local requirement.
Yeah,
So maybe we should look at that.
15%. Who knows?
And as I said, we've almost never had this issue before,
Yeah.
so it's never really been a problem. So,
Right.
it's enough there to make sure the developer tidies everything up at the end after the road acceptance is done. We've never had to worry about, is there enough there to do the work? So,
Well, we did with, I know that things progressed with.
there's a couple recently, but for a long time we never had any issues like that. So, but yeah, that's probably a good one to review. Higher percentage if it's an LLC.
I don't think you can discriminate.
Okay.
A few just others kind of in the
Yeah.
same ballpark that I
Yeah.
was thinking. We could do an earth removal special permit. I know that there's a section in our code that talks about earth removal on site. But I was thinking about this when the comprehensive permit came up to the ZBA just recently at Mallard Lane, and the applicant is talking about raising the elevation of what is now a cart path to a road by 7 feet. And so obviously that's bringing in a lot of fill, but the site is also an old gravel pit, and you have to, I'm aware that the value of those soils is pretty high, and so want to make sure that the town isn't, as we face a lot of development pressures, the town isn't essentially mined of its existing soils, and so having a more firm earth removal permit might be of interest. You could pick up other types of projects that aren't just residential development.
I did a project in the town of Wilmington. They had an earth removal permit that we had to submit for as well. So if you want to see it,
Wilmington?
Yeah, town of Wilmington.
Yeah.
I think along the same lines, this is again at our favorite current development. I think when we were on the sidewalk, it was pointing out that the front yards were loamed and the backyards weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there needs to be a minimum performance, whether that's in the rules and regs or bylaw. I don't know quite which, but that's something,
That's something that was going to come up in this conversation, I think, that I have with the town of Harvard, because I haven't come across this before, and I don't mean to jump to another agenda item, but it is interesting to think about how you ensure that all elements of a subdivision are created according to plan, if it's not attached to a large bond. There's no guarantee for the full site. It's all just attached to the road. So I wonder what we could do to better protect ourselves for future development.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, along those lines, like I brought up earlier, and is there a way to generalize the bond? Like, have
Yeah.
some way to determine what the figure is, but then generalize it somehow where, I don't know. I just feel like we get back to, we're getting backed into a corner, and I just don't know legally if we can reword how we handle bonds.
If there's another bond type that we could use, because I think it is important. I think you do need to have a bond that has specific items attached to road acceptance. I think that is important.
Yeah.
But exactly what you're getting at is can there be some sort of guarantee for all other items,
Right.
Within reason on site?
Yeah, so you have the road acceptance bond, but then you have just a subdivision bond, what does it say? It's $100,000 or something. I don't even know. Just any subdivision over, well, what's a subdivision? Over 5 houses, right? Yeah, 5 or more.
Yeah.
Just a subdivision bond. I don't know. Which would cover backyards and, whatever miscellaneous things that, come up.
I mean, the big challenge, there's a lot of things, right? But when the developer starts selling off, the properties, and then you get basically private, landowners in there who don't know really anything about the town, rules and regulations and bylaws and all that. And then they, the developer might promise them things or whatever. And then we get pulled into, I understand, understand stuff with the road and all that, but when we get pulled into, well, my backyard doesn't have grass, it should have grass, it's kind of like, yes, based on the subdivision, that we approved, all that stuff's there. Then the developer is going to say, well, the owner did this landscaping, they did this, we did. So I don't know, that's another part that's just, it'd be interesting to see if, how other towns, have handled it, if they've handled it, if there's any other things we can learn, because then we kind of get in this situation where, we get pulled into discussions where we really don't have any say, and I mean, I like your idea, Eric, but I also think, well, then what if you get, a new homeowner in there who's just unhappy, like, well, this grass isn't, my lawn isn't as green as my neighbor's lawn,
Right.
It's tough, right? It's a
Well,
tough
I
one.
think, having moved into, a couple different new houses, the lawn is always an issue. They come in and hydroseed, and then it's kind of up to the homeowner to keep it sufficiently watered. But one of the things we saw on some of the houses on Moderator Way was there's no loam there to, so they could hydroseed all summer, all year round, and there's no base there for the grass seed to take in. So, that's where, you kind of have to differentiate what's kind of the infrastructure that the developer does have. What are the things the developer does have control over, like amount of loam or driveway location and width, we already, septic systems are verified when they're put in, the building inspector reviews the construction and all of that. This is kind of the parts of the house outside of that the developer is responsible for, but like, going and saying, well, the grass didn't grow, well, it's okay, did you water it or not? That's a discussion I don't want, that we can't be part of.
So what about this? So, when we do the bond, we say how much everything's worth, and then we do a 1.5 factor, right? What if we release the bond, like the road acceptance, just so we take the 1.5, and then the 0.5 is released on road acceptance, and as things are completed on the road, we just give like the 100, what it was originally. So the 100%, we release up to that, but then we keep that 50%. Is that something we could do? That 50% is just a general protection for the town until.
I think I'm sure there's a lot of laws governing how bonds need to be released and stuff like that. So we gotta be careful.
Right, yeah. So I guess maybe Valerie, you can look to see what similar towns to us do for
Yeah.
bonding these types of things.
And see what Harvard has to say. I mean, I think that's a good starting place. Yeah, I know when Erica was talking about, can we limit it to 3 bond releases, town council said no on that. That
I can see
ran
why she
afoul of-
asked.
Hmm?
I can see why she asked. This is not usual, typical.
Well, I think that was, I think Century Mill was the driving one there where it was, every month or two, we were getting a bond request for, oh, I did the curbing here, so I want a bond, I want, $10,000 here and, 5,000 there. And then, so it was
Wow.
much more
Okay.
piecemeal.
Well, and then it eventually got, that particular project, it got to a point where we only had, 10, 20,000, and it wasn't done to as built, like the slope was off. And so we had to vote to accept these things that didn't meet the as built because, well, we didn't have enough bond anyway to, to have it fixed. So it's just, we always get into trouble with these bonds.
And that's part of why I'm a little hesitant to release a lot more until we can really justify that there's work being completed there. But this is we're off topic here a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, we can, I'd say we've just talked about a bunch of different things. Val, if you want to kind of put a list together for us to look at potential articles, then we can kind of vet through them in the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right.
Good. So there's one other item that I wanted to discuss briefly here. Back in June or July, I forget when it was, when they extended when remote meetings could continue, we said we'd readdress whether we wanted to do in-person or remote, in September. So it's September now. So it's.
I mean, I would say personally, just given the Delta variant and all of the things that are going on, I know the other societies that I am active in, they basically extended that to the end of the year, January 3rd, and basically said they still are promoting remote meetings for that. So that would be my thought, but
I don't disagree. I mean, my company went back to phase 1, so I'm not. I won't be back in the building there anytime soon. So
you're a permanent resident of Maine?
No, I'm a resident of Massachusetts.
I'm fine with staying Zoom. I mean, I think we get more participation from citizens and stuff. Just stay in Zoom.
Can I ask, are other, like the Board of Selectmen, are they meeting in person? Or are they still doing Zoom meetings?
In Bolton, they're still, I think all other boards that I'm aware of at least are still doing fully Zoom meetings.
Okay.
I think that unfortunately the COM had to have one meeting hybrid. There's a 1-day period between the governor's extension of open meeting law restriction or provisions. But I think, yes, most boards in Bolton are still doing Zoom. I know that, next door in Stowe, I think it's only the ZBA and the selectmen that are doing in person, but it does seem complicated to do a hybrid meeting because you still need to have a quorum present physically to do a hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, what I was wondering, and what I brought up at the last meeting was if when we do want to kind of go back to, in person, could we do a hybrid thing where it's the board members are there present, and this would require some upgrading of technology, like having a TV, having a webcam, that can view us. But I did go to the town of Middlebury for a meeting 2 months ago. And literally I walked into the room, and so the entire board's all there. They're all there in person, but it's being recorded and it's being viewed and it's up on TV monitors. So, anyone that's zooming in, could see, I mean, it's a little bit of a combination. So obviously if there's a presentation, you're gonna see the presentation, but if there's no presentation, then you'll see the board talking. But you need a TV and a webcam. So I don't know if it's something, I mean, I saw that we have a liaison from the advisory committee, Brian. And I thought that would be a great thing to bring up with him. And this doesn't obviously just for the planning board, but anyone that's using that room could potentially hold a hybrid meeting. I think you're right 100% that the meeting the board members have to be there in person, but it would certainly alleviate a lot of potential people being there, you know, in the crowd. So I didn't know if it was something we could bring up to put on the article as an expense for the town to purchase a TV and you know, whatever it is that's needed to do that. I know that room is really small.
Well, we have the live cams. We would just need a big TV. That's
We need a
all.
big TV, yeah.
Well, no, I didn't know, we're not, our meetings weren't live. They were all.
They stopped
Planning
being,
board.
they stopped being.
live. They were recording them and posting them later, so we'd have to go back to having live meetings and, you know, and the technology to allow people to connect in and zoom in or.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But I
provide
don't
questions.
think it's a bad thing. I mean, just considering, I mean, we don't know what's to come in the future and just kind
Right.
of starting to prepare for that now, having seen how some of the other towns have done that. And I think part of it is they had the TVs there for presentation purposes because it was a much
Yeah.
bigger room. They were able to adapt to it a lot easier. But I think if we could start to think about that and even potentially get an expense, you know, put in for town meeting for next year, so we could implement that. I know these things take a year, you know, of planning. I think that would be good.
Well, but also, I mean, you know, going to meetings for somebody not on a board is hard, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty antiquated, you know, to make people have to go when we have the technology we do, you know, even when we go back in person. I think, you know, there should always be the option to remote in, you know? Even with
I just had to go to New Bedford for 2 Concom hearings. Let me tell you, I wish
that's
those
what I
were
was-
remote. I really wish those were remote.
Born and raised, how'd you like it? A little bit of a disaster zone.
It was just a long drive. It was a very long drive.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think talking to advisory and I mean, that would be shared with, you know, us and the selectmen and.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's more of a town hall expense. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think, I mean, I'd be happy to have the technology there to simplify some of this stuff. I think that's a discussion worth having, I think.
Yeah.
It's already happening. I wonder, you know, if it is happening with other boards as well, or you know, what the thought is. And as far as I haven't been to the Houghton building yet, but as far as that outfitting that room a little bit more too.
I mean, that room's bigger. That room's definitely bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've heard that.
It might be better to do it in there and do planning board meetings, move there or something. I don't know. But you know, if advisory if we could poke, you know, it to advisory, see what they think. You know, obviously it needs to be benefit multiple boards or committees and stuff like that, but I think that would be good.
Yeah.
But I guess, Mark, to get back to your original question, I would be okay with making a motion to say that all meetings till the end of the year were remote. I don't know how the other members feel.
Yes, I second that.
Okay. Let's do a roll call.
Danielle Spicer,
Aye.
Eric,
All right.
Pete,
Aye.
and Mark.
I
Okay.
think that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want me to make a motion to adjourn?
There's nothing else on the agenda, so I think that would be appropriate.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
And
Right.
yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Anybody?
right.
opposed?
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thank you.
Have a
Talk
good
to you later.
night.